Hi and welcome back to the Casual Watch Review channel. This week we have hands-on with the new Casio fitness watch. This is the DW-H5600. In a world where high-tech smartwatches and multifunctional wearables dominate the market, there's something expected but also comforting about this new G-Shock. But is this too little too late from Casio? Well, let's review both of these models and then I'm going to compare it against the equivalent Garmin, which I judge to be the Garmin Instinct Solar. This watch captures the essence of Casio's renowned G-Shock Square line while incorporating modern features we have never seen on this model before, all with a touch of retro flair. But it's clear Casio, after once being at the cutting edge of digital watch technology in the 80s and 90s, has really allowed the competition to excel in recent years. Companies like Garmin, Polar, Fitbit and Apple have really dominated the smart fitness watch market, so much so that Casio is often overlooked in that segment. This was more than evident with the Casio WSD-F30, their first totally smart watch that failed to make any market impact and was subsequently discontinued. Before we start the review, let's outline what I'll be covering. I'll be going over a review of this watch, both models, features and functionalities of the watch, and then I'll be doing a brief comparison against the Garmin Instinct. If you're fans of the channel, you'll know that I am not a fitness YouTuber and I don't review smartwatches. So I won't be doing an in-depth review of the smartwatch functionalities and how usable it is for marathon running, cycling, or competitive sports. I'm a watch enthusiast foremost, as you all know. I'll give you my opinion on which one I prefer because I have owned this Garmin Instinct probably for a year now and I've had this G-Shock for the last 2 weeks. Before we start, I do want to highlight that Casio did send me one of these watches for review. That was after I purchased the black one for myself. So you will get to see both versions here, one I paid for and one I was gifted for review. I was actually really honoured to be asked to review this watch by Casio after being a massive fan of the brand since I was a kid. And this is in no small part to all of you that have stuck with me over the years and subscribed and viewed my upload. So a big thank you to everyone. As I've probably put Garmin in the title, if you're here to find out which watch is better or which you should choose over the Garmin or G-Shock, if you're looking for a watch that is better for fitness, then to save you from having to watch the entire review, the Garmin is just a more mature product. Their companion smartphone app is much better than Casio's. The ability to view your progress via their website and export your data or port that data to other fitness apps is something that I've so far seen unparalleled with what Casio have to offer on this watch. And not to mention the ability to link other products like smart scales, bike cadence sensors, and a host of other third-party devices. In many respects, the G-Shock is more akin to how fitness trackers were maybe 5 to 7 years ago. Also, if you're into cycling, this watch really has no features specific to that, unlike Garmin, which most models have specific features for cyclists. Having said all that, I'm actually going to sell my Garmin and stick with this G-Shock. Because at the end of the day, this watch has the functionality I need, but most of all, it just looks cool. The Garmin is ugly in comparison. The G-Shock looks sleek and modern, whereas the Garmin looks like a prop from the original Total Recall film. Casio has clearly taken a cue or two from the way smartwatches are packaged. Here is the Garmin packaging compared to the G-Shock. Again, G-Shock has gone with a cardboard box and fabric bag. I don't mind it too much with this watch. It did leave me very cold when their 40th anniversary G-Shock Square came with a recycled box. This watch is thicker than the standard Square, as you can imagine, coming in at 51.1mm by 44.5mm and a thickness of 17.4mm. But incredibly, it still only weighs 56 grams, so is very wearable, and even though it is larger, you don't necessarily notice that size when you're wearing it. The case and band are made from Casio's bio-based resin. We've discussed this before as being made from materials extracted from castor seed speed and corn. Band is excellent and has a lot more adjustment holes than the regular square. That's needed on a smartwatch because the sensors do need to be closer to the skin. The watch is thicker at 17.4mm, but not obnoxiously so. It fits my 7.2-inch wrist perfectly. It is taller due to the bump on the back housing the sensor, but with the watch being so light, I never noticed the hump on the back being an issue. I know Russell over at the Mad Watch Collector did notice this, so definitely check out his review as a comparison to my review here. Even with all the added sensors and technology, this watch still impressively has a 200-meter water resistance. And in keeping with G-Shock only blessing us with sapphire crystal on watches that cost many of thousands of dollars, this also has mineral crystal. This has always confused me because the main Casio brand has sapphire crystal even on some of their $100 watches. You'll remember the $99 edifice that I recently reviewed that included sapphire crystal, so there's no excuse really. But behind that mineral crystal is a beautiful, clear and precise memory in pixel or MIP display, ensuring high visibility. This is gorgeous in person. The detail is so impressive. Look how detailed the battery charge icon is, and even when text is displayed smaller, like on the notifications, you can still clearly read it. You can display an entire text message on the screen, and it's workable to read it in a pinch, although you can't do a quick reply on this watch. And while we're at it, I also couldn't find a feature on the watch that allowed you to pause or play music, although there is the ability to find your phone from the watch, and I think vice versa as well. The backlight is also fantastic and can illuminate the entire display for up to 5 seconds. All the watch's functionality can be set up and used independently of the phone, but utilizing the companion app streamlines time adjustment, alternative time zone addition, and the basic settings just much easier. I would highly encourage you just to use the app to do all of these settings. The big feature the screen is missing that the Garmin excels at is the ability to have multiple faces for the watch. You only have 3 options on the G-Shock. The Garmin even allows you to customize each of the faces. There is very little of that available on the H5600. I think only one of the faces you can alter. Also a massive plus for the Garmin screen. Although I do think that the G-Shock screen is more legible, the Garmin screen allows you to choose either positive or negative. This seems a silly oversight for them not to offer this as a customizable feature for the G-Shock. I would leave it in the positive display all the time if that was an option. I personally think it's a lot more legible. Both modules in the blue and black are exactly the same, even sharing the orangey brown text that I have grown quite fond of. The bezel, as Russell over at the Mad Watch Collector pointed out in his review, is easy to remove. However, I have not dared to try and take my bezel off yet. I guess the idea of the bezel being easy to remove, and there is a little notch for you to get your nail in, so I do believe that the bezel is intended to be removed quite easily. I guess the thinking there is that more sweat or debris might get between the bezel and the main module of the watch if you're doing more sports over perhaps what the standard square would be subjected to. I really like both colour variants. The blue is more towards the grey spectrum and includes some nice white text. The black case is almost stealthed out and is completely black all the way over with no highlight of the text. Both include a black tang and buckle, although the keeper on the blue is a slightly different shade of blue than the rest of the watch. I'm not quite sure why they did that. Maybe the keeper is made from a slightly different plastic and they couldn't colour match them quite so well. Even though this does look like a traditional G-Shock square, the functionality of the buttons is completely different. The only one that's similar is the light button, but all the other buttons have a completely different functionality than you would see on a traditional G-Shock square. So you are going to have to relearn how to use this watch, as this watch does pair with an app, and for the most part, if you're going to be using it for fitness activities, you will be syncing it with the app. So how does it compare in comparison to the Garmin? For the most part, the app works well, but the watch does take longer to sync than the Garmin does. For the first 2 days, the watch would do a really weird thing where it looked like it was syncing. Almost every time I looked down at the watch, it was doing this. I have no idea what this was, but it stopped after 2 days, and so far I've never seen it do that again. The watch has many features, but again, it's not as feature rich as the Garmin watch is. But some of the highlights it has are activity tracking, multi-sport, which includes running, walking, and something they call gym workout. For running and walking, you can measure distance, speed, pace, and other information using the accelerometer. And for adding that to a map, that can sync with the GPS on the phone. The watch also allows you to measure cardio load status. Heart rate sensor can measure from 30 to 220 beats per minute. One of the things that I quite like was the sleep measurement, and I've been wearing this watch at night for the last 5 days just to test that feature out. You can also measure blood oxygen levels and a weird breathing exercise feature, which I haven't quite got the hang of it, although it does do an interesting animation on the screen. All of the sleep settings, the activity monitoring, and the daily step measurements are all stored under a part of the app called the Life Log. This will monitor activities whether you're in or out of the gym. You don't have to set it to record. You can have it set to measure your steps during an activity during the day. I may not be in the gym all the time, but living in Orlando, I frequent a lot of the theme parks. I use this watch to measure a day at Universal. It managed to measure the walking well, but did jump around a lot. I presume this was when I was either on a ride or inside. I can't really tell because the map is only visible on the app and you can't zoom in that far on it. I also used this to measure how much my heart rate went up on one of the more extreme rides they have at Universal, the Revenge of the Mummy. As you can see, during the more extreme parts of the ride, my heart rate did go up, so that was interesting to see. One of the big features, honestly, the app really needs is the ability to export your data or port that data to other fitness tools. This watch, as far as I can tell, can only sync with the smartphone app, and there is no platform to sync it with a web portal. The Garmin web portal is excellent, for example. Some of the functionalities on the G-Shock is listed as being made by Polar, but I can't find an easy way to see if you can access the Polar site to view this. There may be a way, but it's certainly not obvious from the Casio app, and there's no instructions when you're in the app to give you access to the Polar site. But for the activities that I have measured with this watch, the app does work well, and the app might be all most people need. I'm sure one of the big questions on this watch, being similar to a G-Shock Square, is how easy the buttons are to operate when compared to other smartwatches. The buttons on this are slightly larger, but they are recessed similar to a standard G-Shock Square. Honestly, I thought this would bother me more. You do still need to dig your finger in there or a nail. The Garmin clearly has easier to operate buttons, and although they are easy to operate, I often had to put the key lock in because I would frequently accidentally knock the buttons on the side of the Garmin and switch to functions that I wasn't actually looking for at the time. The G-Shock certainly won't suffer from any of these accidental button pushes, but you may struggle if you've been doing intensive exercise and your hands are a bit shaky afterwards, and I imagine action these with gloves would be an absolute nightmare. Also, the buttons can be slightly confusing because both the mode and enter buttons on this watch have different features. The enter button is used to scroll through the fitness features, and the mode is used for all of the other stuff. It's a bit clunky at first, to be honest, and not that intuitive. The watch's battery lasts a long time. I have only charged this once in over a week. That's on par with the Garmin, although the way the Garmin charges looks a lot less like a medical device versus the G-Shock. They've gone all in with the clip system on the G-Shock, whereas the Garmin just has a little cable that clips in the back. Both the Garmin and G-Shock have solar charging. I think it just gives you a little top-up charge when you're in the sun, but both watches will need to be plugged in if you're regularly using them for activities. I can't imagine that the G-Shock could solely work off solar if you just left it on a windowsill to charge up over the day. I'm really interested, for all the G-Shock fans that are watching this, what do you think of this new watch? It's taken the traditional G-Shock Square that we know and love, but added a lot of advanced features. I really like this. The display alone, even if you didn't use it as a fitness tracker, but the display alone is just absolutely gorgeous. It also doesn't look like a fitness tracker, unlike a lot of the other watches that we've discussed. As always, really appreciate you watching. If you're new to the channel, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time on Casual Watch Reviews.